Hey guys, what's going on? Today I'm going to be bringing you guys a brief history of the National Basketball Association, starting from 1949 all the way up until the early 2000s. So without further ado, let's get right into it. On August 3rd, 1949, the Basketball Association of America, also known as the BAA, and the National Basketball League, also known as the NBL, both set aside their differences and decided to merge together to form what we now know today as the National Basketball Association, or NBA. This newly formed association would consist of 17 different teams located in cities across the country, big and small. Teams such as the New York Knicks, Boston Celtics, Minneapolis Lakers, and Rochester Royals were all part of the original 17. Not only was the NBA the first to merge two different basketball organizations together, they were also the first basketball league to allow African American players into the league. And in the first season of the NBA, the Washington Capitals did just that. During the first ever NBA draft, the Capitals drafted Earl Lloyd, and later that year he started for the team in their very first game. Lloyd would go on to play another 10 years in the association and decided to hang him up after the 1960 season. He averaged 8.4 points per game, 1.4 assists, and 6.4 rebounds. He recently passed away back in 2015. He will always be remembered, and he has his mark on the game of basketball forever. During the first season of the NBA in 1950, basketball was still a raw game. There were not very many rules set in place, and this didn't rest easy with the fans as well as the players. This went on for about 4 seasons, and at the end of the 1954-55 season, the league was reduced to only 8 teams from the original 17 due to the lack of funds. Players stopped playing, and fans simply were not watching. This was a problem for the NBA, and this called for a change. During the 1955-56 season, the 24-second shot clock was introduced, bringing in a new wave of entertainment for fans, and the arenas began to fill due to the faster pace of the game. This would propel the league into the 1960s, where dynasties would begin to form. The 1960s would be dominated by the Boston Celtics and their all-time NBA great, Bill Russell. Russell would forever change the way the big man was used on the defensive end of the floor by being the greatest rebounder of all time. Russell averaged 22.5 rebounds a game for his career. This is only one of his records that will never be broken. The Celtics won 9 out of 10 championships during the 60s, on top of the 2 they had previously won in 1957 and 59, giving them a grand total of 11 championships over a 13-year span. Russell would be the only Celtic to be a part of every single championship team, making him not only the greatest winner in the NBA, but the greatest winner in the history of American sports. Speaking of records that will never be broken, there was one other spotlight in the 1960s other than the Celtics bringing home the championship every single year. That was Wilt the Stilt Chamberlain's 100-point game against the New York Knicks in 1962. Chamberlain had already shattered the previous record set by himself earlier that year of 78 points in a game. Then, on March 2nd, 1962, he did the impossible, destroying his own record of 78 by 22 points by scoring 100 points in a single game. Wilt Chamberlain is the only player in NBA history to ever record triple digits in a single NBA game. The second highest scoring game in NBA history came in 2007 when Kobe Bryant scored 81 points against the Toronto Raptors. This just shows you how great of a record this is, for it to stand for over 54 years and no one come even close to breaking it. After the Celtics' dominance in the 1960s, that now brings us to the 1970s. The 1970s is a very interesting part in NBA history because in those 10 years, you don't have one team like the Celtics dominating an entire era. There were 8 different champions in those 10 years, the only 2 teams repeating being the Celtics with 2 championships and the New York Knicks with 2 championships. Not only did you have 8 different teams winning championships in the 70s, but 6 of those 8 teams, that was their first championship for their franchise, and some of them their only championship for their franchise. So that's pretty cool to have that many winners and have some of those be significant to that franchise because it's their only championship that they've ever gotten. The New York Knicks getting their first championship in 1970 and then their second one in 1973. The Milwaukee Bucks getting a championship in 1971 with Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. The Golden State Warriors getting their first one in 1975. The Portland Trail Blazers getting their first and only one in 1977, along with the Washington Bullets in 1978 getting their first and only, as well as the Seattle Supersonics in 1979. Another reason the 70s is significant to the NBA is the ABA-NBA merger in 1976. As I mentioned earlier, with the BAA and the NBL joining together to form the NBA in 1967, the ABA was created, another basketball league to rival the NBA. Like I said, the ABA was founded in 1967. Its sole purpose was to reach out to cities that the NBA didn't, which they succeeded to do, but the cities they reached out to simply couldn't produce the money that the NBA could. This issue, along with some bad business decisions, would lead the ABA to its ultimate downfall. Roughly 9 years later, on August 5, 1976, ABA owners met with NBA owners and agreed to merge the leagues into one big NBA. The terms agreed upon would terminate 3 of the 7 ABA teams and distribute the players of those teams respectively, as well as add the remaining 4 teams of the ABA into the NBA. These teams being the Philadelphia 76ers, the San Antonio Spurs, the Indiana Pacers, and the Denver Nuggets. There was also one more rule added right before the turn of the decade, and that was the addition of the three-point line in 1979. Now teams that struggled with an inside game on the offensive end had an opportunity to beat their opponents by shooting the ball from the three. Which now takes us up to the 1980s. The 1980s really started off in 1979 when 2 of the greatest players of all time were selected 1st and 6th overall in the NBA draft. Selected 1st overall by the LA Lakers, Irving Magic Johnson, and being selected 6th overall by the Boston Celtics, Larry Bird. This would become one of the greatest rivalries the NBA has ever seen. The Lakers and Celtics would meet each other not once, not twice, but 3 times on the NBA's biggest stage, in 1984, 1985, and 1987, with the Lakers winning 2 out of the 3 championships. While the Celtics and Lakers were dueling it out in the 1984 NBA Finals, a future 6-time NBA champion was about to be drafted, and that champion was Michael Jordan. Michael Jordan would go on to finish his rookie season in 1985 and take home the NBA's Rookie of the Year. The following season, Michael Jordan would face off against Larry Bird and the champion Celtics in the Eastern Conference playoffs. In Game 2 of the series, Michael went off on the Celtics, scoring an NBA record 63 points in a playoff game. Larry Bird went on to say after the game, quote, "It was God disguised as Michael Jordan tonight." The Celtics still ended up winning the series and would eventually meet up with Magic Johnson and the Lakers in the NBA Finals later that year. Towards the end of the 1980s, the NBA was becoming more and more physical each year. This gave way to the emergence of the Detroit Pistons, also known as the Bad Boys, making it to the NBA Finals in 1988 to try and dethrone the mighty Los Angeles Lakers. The Bad Boy Pistons, led by point guard Isaiah Thomas and center Bill Laimbeer, were stopped just short of their goals by losing to the Lakers in 7 games. The Bad Boys would get their revenge, however, the following year, beating the Lakers in a 4-game series in a sweep. This was the Pistons' first championship in franchise history. Which now takes us to the 1990s. The Pistons would continue their dominance in the 1990 season, making their way back to the NBA Finals and beating the Portland Trail Blazers in 5 games. Things were looking up for the Pistons, but they would eventually meet their maker when Michael Jordan and the Chicago Bulls knocked them out of the playoffs in the 1991 season. Michael Jordan and the Bulls would go on to win the title later that year and would stick around to dominate the 90s by winning the next 2 championships in 1992 and 1993. After the 1993 NBA season, Michael Jordan had 3 rings and would now take a break from the game of basketball by sitting out of the 1994 and 95 seasons respectively. With Michael Jordan gone, this opened the door for many franchises such as the Houston Rockets to grab a couple of titles for themselves. The very next year, the Rockets would battle their way back to the NBA Finals to face another talented big man and his team, the Orlando Magic, that big man being Shaquille O'Neal. Hakeem Olajuwon, being the seasoned veteran that he was, proved to be too much for the young Shaq, and the Rockets swept the Magic in a 4-game series, repeating as champions. The Rockets' offseason would be cut short because in 1996, Jordan would return to the NBA looking to win himself more hardware and etch his name in NBA history as one of the greatest players to ever play the game. Of course, the Bulls won the championship again in the 1996 season with Jordan's return, and soon after repeated as champions in 1997, and once more for the three-peat in 1998, giving Jordan 2 three-peats in a career, permanently marking him as one of the greatest players to ever step foot on an NBA court. Now Michael Jordan, after winning 6 championships with the Chicago Bulls in an 8-year span, had decided to permanently retire from the game of basketball, saying at his retirement speech in 1998, "I have given everything to the game, and I have reached the pinnacle of my career, and there's nothing left for me to give." The 1999 NBA season without Michael Jordan and the Bulls would prove to be an interesting one, as young and upcoming star Tim Duncan, along the side of Admiral David Robinson, would go on to win the 1999 NBA Finals against the New York Knicks. Duncan would prove to be the centerpiece for the Spurs moving forward after winning the franchise its first ever NBA championship, and for the next few years up until the 2000s all the way to 2014 would end up winning 4 more titles, giving the franchise a grand total of 5 championships and 5 rings for Duncan, solidifying himself and his career as one of the greatest power forwards to ever play in the NBA. Well guys, that's going to about wrap it up here, stopping at 1999. If you'd like another video of me covering 2000 up until the present, go ahead and let me know in the comments below. If there's anything that I left out, I'm sorry. There's only so much that I can talk about in one video in this short amount of time. There's a lot to cover between 1949 up until 1999, and crunching that down into 11 minutes is sometimes a little difficult. So if you guys would like more information on this topic, or you would like me to make another video about more recent and upcoming NBA history, go ahead and let me know in the comments below. And until next time guys, have a good one.